the Swiss Asian Chamber of Commerce, the New Silk Road Institute, and Caspian Week about BRI and the New World Order in a paradoxical world. You all may have noticed that the world and the rules of the world are currently undergoing a few changes. There's a new power arising. Some of the old powers are struggling to keep their place or are struggling to keep some of the old powers in check. We believe it's very interesting times, and we believe the world order as we knew it after World War II, new ways forward. The classical success model that we're all used to, namely capitalism, model in this part of the world. And I think as we speak, everyone or most of the people here still subscribe to it. Combined with democracy is possibly reaching its limit. It was a highly successful, let's call it bad news or fake news or whatever you want to call it, to get elected. And populism is on the rise. However, there are signs of trouble. See that the democratic process leads to very populistic leaderships, to short-term thinking, to electioneering, to using of, I would see the rise of populism in some of the democratic regimes, let's say Hungary and Poland. Silly decisions are on the rise, and amongst one of the silly decisions I would see Brexit, just to give you an example. It's all over. It could be just something that is passing, but it could be something that is a sign of, you see populism arising in very normal countries like the Netherlands. You see it in Germany, AfD, shifts that are taking place that are more momentous than what you would think. We tried to shifts that are taking place that are more momentous than what you would think. We tried to find 4 paradoxes. So we will organize 2 panels this morning. We tried to isolate 4 paradoxical pairs, and along these 4 paradoxical pairs, we would like to engage you in a discussion of how the world could be, where it could go, and what it could mean for our future. And frankly speaking, it's a very wide open topic. We do not want to tell you where the world is going. We do not want to tell you this is where it must go. We are just trying to tell you we are currently on shifting grounds, and we should think about where the world should go to. And this, as you can imagine, is very much a topic between superpowers and blocs aligned with superpowers. And as you know, the Belt Road Initiative is an initiative of one of the superpowers that is touching many others along its way. The Belt Road Initiative brings ideas and concepts of maybe a neglected superpower into the vision and into the eyesight of many of the countries where it goes through. One of the countries, for example, Pakistan, I'm sure they have a lot to say about it. Other countries like Switzerland, we do not yet have to say a lot about it because we have not been touched, but we see what's going on. This is why I think it is a very important topic for us in Switzerland. We believe, and now I try to to make the bridge into the organizations that are organizing this panel. We believe that Switzerland could play a very important role in being a stage for discussions like today's discussions to take place. We have a relatively neutral stand, or we have traditionally a very neutral stand, but of course we are part of Europe. Europe typically is influenced by the old Western powers. Nevertheless, I believe Switzerland is capable of giving neutral ground, having a neutral position, allowing for a academic neutral discussion to take place. Of course, the Belt Road Initiative is a projection of influence. It is also a projection of power. But possibly, it is just a projection of influence and power that will forthwith balance powers and influence that come from the other superpower. And as I'm saying, the world is shifting, and the rules and the order are shifting. Maybe it's time to give your head, once in your quiet moment, when you don't have to answer emails or WhatsApps, it gives you the peace of mind to think about where the world is going and where you want it to go, and where you should educate your children where it should go. And talking about children, my latest experience that I just had when I discussed with our 9-year-old about how she should be self-motivated to shape her own future and become a good student. She kind of looked at me and said, "Is there a future?" And I couldn't help looking at her and said, "What are you talking about?" And then she says, "Everyone is saying there will be a third world war." I said, I couldn't believe it. So in the next day, I discussed with one of my friends, what does your daughter say with regard to another world war? His answer was, all these kids are talking about the Third World War. Somewhere in the blogosphere for children, there is some talk about a world war happening. When I see that, I get really worried. And then I get to the point where I think a discussion, as we should have it today, as we discuss about who thinks how about one of these major shifts, and how should we maybe think about these shifts, is very crucial. With this introduction, I want to slowly head over the topic to our panelists today. I will introduce them shortly from my side, from my right, which is your left, to your right. And they will all contribute some ideas about where they see the world to go and what they think about it. The topics that this panel will deal with are the paradoxical pair of sustainability versus exploitation, and the paradoxical pair of equality versus nationalism. The first panelist that we hear today is Henry Lee. He's managing partner of Hendale Group, a true international citizen of this world. I think born in mainland China, moved to another part of China, then raised in the US, and now living in Hong Kong, married to a Chinese Swiss. Is that correct?
Parts of it, yes.
Part of it. Henry is managing partner of a private equity fund, so he knows and sees what's happening in China, and he knows and sees what's interesting to invest in. And it could be that anything that you must invest in are just big polluters, for example, but it could also be that they are not big polluters and that they have changed their ways. Next to Henry is Fabian Gull. He's a journalist and a China media executive, lived for a while in China, one of the hidden Swiss jewels. Mainly, he looks Swiss, but he knows how Asians function, and he knows how to deal with Asians. He has researched quite a bit in his lifetime. He will have a lot to say on any topic. Next to Fabian is Cheng, chairwoman of Fosun Fashion Group. Fosun Fashion Group owns brands like Lanvin, Woodford. She is managing all of those, chairwoman of all these groups. A lady that knows the numbers, a lady that had to learn how to come from China and deal with these silly Europeans. And a lady that has her problems carved out for herself, but must know how to deal with us from the other side. So I'm very interested to hear what Yoon will tell us. Then next to Yoon is Igor Almazov from Power Grid ABB. He, of course, straddles the middle between the superpowers of Europe and China. He comes from the middle ground. He knows about the ways of large industrial companies. He can tell us whether he benefits, let's say, from sustainability. He can say whether he benefits or his company benefits from nationalism. And he can say whether it's healthy and good looking forward to do the either or the other. Then last but not least is Professor Boqiang. He is one of the, let's call it, most prominent experts on energy policy and energy future. He has some very interesting numbers. We had the chance to have dinner with him yesterday, and he knows how to put the angle onto very interesting statistic facts and show us the world is not as simple as we think it is. And so he will close off today's round of panels. And without further ado, I would like to give the word to Henry Lee and let him give you his wisdom. The way the panel functions is we will have each panelist go through with about 5 to 10 minutes of presentations. If there are immediate questions, of course you are allowed to ask them, but then we want to move on to the next panelist. And at the end, there should be an open question and answer session. Thank you very much, and Henry Lee, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Do this sitting down is okay? All right, okay. So thank you again, Urs. Fantastic introduction. I think he covered the world in 10 minutes and left us with not much really to talk about. But what we can do, I think, is probably what I can do is give you my perspective, and of course, as with any fantastic panel that's been put together, I'm really eagerly awaiting to hear from the other panelists as to what their thoughts are from their respective vantage points. And thank you again, Caspian, for hosting all of us and all of you. This is a fantastic venue that you guys have year-round, right? I think. Is it? No. Oh, just for this event. Okay. But it would be nice to have it all year round if there is, because we need more dialogue in this world. And let me start off by just my observation is, I think sadly, as I was reading, the world is becoming more unilateral. And by that, I mean, the US really effectively does what it wants to do. But if you have the world power doing what it wants to do, what it does is it forces all the lesser powers to do what they want to do. And so the unilateralism, which I think has been prompted by the US, is now spreading throughout the world. So not that the rest of the world wants to do what it wants to do, but because you have a global power that is doing what it wants to do, then other people are also forced to do what they want, what they need to do. So I think case in point would be China. You know, China wants to engage, but the US wants China to engage on its terms. So it forces China to do various initiatives like the Belt Road. And the Belt Road has been around, I think, for a number of years now, and I think Xi Jinping, when he came to Davos, even spoke about that. It's really I call it in very simple layman terms, it's the anti-containment policy. It's forcing China, instead of going east towards the Pacific, it's forcing China to go west. But I think the benefit is that that part of Central Europe and Central Asia has never really been integrated. So I think if you look from a historical perspective, there's both good and bad in, I think, what will come out, I think, of this paradoxical world that we live in right now. I think the reliance on the large power, the U.S., will lessen, and I think it'll be a chance actually for the more independent parts of the world to get stronger in the meantime. I think also it's important to note that because we have to have dialogue to facilitate the understanding, and I think what will develop is over time, really two large schools of thought, if you will, and I think that one school of thought is economics with democracy, and the other school of thought is economic development without democracy. And as Urs alluded to, the prevailing Western thought is that with economic progress comes democracy, and it becomes a necessary condition. But I think, in the rest of the world, where values are different, I think you can have economic development without democracy in the Western sense. Now, this is very difficult, I think, for most of us who have been exposed to Western thought to understand, because it's natural. It's natural for humans to want to have their own voice, their own right. But I think the rest of the world operates on a very different value system than the U.S. I mean, I grew up in the U.S., but I'm also a citizen, as Urs said, of the world, so I've seen and lived under different systems. I see the benefit of the U.S. system, but really for the U.S., and we have to be honest, the U.S. system is really tailor-made for the U.S. because of its historical origins. But way before the U.S. existed, you had deep countries with historical significance like China, like Central Europe, like Russia, and they've all lived under different systems. And so I think what will happen over time is you'll have two large camps, both progressing from an economic standpoint, but with vastly different, I think, moral philosophies and value systems. So I'm sorry not to provide any answers here, but I'm just providing, thoughts for us to kind of promote further discussion. My comments again are extremely general, and just really my own thoughts. So, but let me bring it more specific, because I do want to hear specific thoughts from our panelists too. From an investment standpoint, I think it becomes very interesting, because I think in my investment world and the investment world we're used to, cross-border was always the trend. In other words, Western capital coming into Asia, and obviously Chinese capital acquiring foreign businesses. Unfortunately, I think from an investment perspective, things will change. And I think I'm curious to hear about how Fosun believes and thinks about this, because in many ways, it is a great thing to have economic integration, but on the other hand, I think we can see all the problems that come with that economic integration, because with it becomes the conflict of value systems and so forth. So from an investment perspective, yes, we're finding it extremely difficult because we do investments around the world, and I think the operating rules around the world are vastly different. I mean, business is business, but when it comes to minority rights, when it comes to, even board dynamics, all of these, I think, frequently create, I guess, if you will, instances where we can see the cultural differences quite dramatically. So I think this is just going to make the world more difficult, because the world, again, back to my central thesis, instead of becoming a more multilateral world, I think it's becoming a more unilateral world.
Thank you, Henry. If there are no pressing questions, I would like to move on to Fabian Gull. Henry, you have to give him your microphone. Thank you. Fabian, the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. So, good morning, everyone. Since time is very limited, I understand, I will skip my introduction part and start straight away with maybe 3 major misconceptions I do stumble across on a regular basis concerning China. I have spent most of my professional life as a media executive in Shanghai and other places in Asia. And I'm always confronted with the following. So first of all, mainly in Europe, in the West, people are struggling to understand that economic success and prosperity is possible in non-democratic societies as well, in rather authoritarian, strictly ruled one-party countries. So in the West, we struggle to understand that. Secondly, Henry, you touched this also, that in the West we like to believe that an economic opening has to be linked to an automatic political opening as well. So we're not seeing this either in China. In fact, since we're seeing rather the opposite, at least since, let's say, the current administration took over a couple of years ago. Ever since, we see, rather, instead of a political opening many would have hoped for, we see more centralism, more nationalism. We see basically a unique concentration of power that was unheard of since the times of Mao Zedong. So this is all very, very new and maybe slightly different than the West would have hoped. In any way, this is in no way meant to criticize China, but the West, because we are struggling to understand China. And so maybe we have to rethink our approach also, instead of maybe, what I also see a lot in Western media is kind of Europe is acting like a moral high ground, is very quick at finger pointing at China, and that is maybe not the very best way of dealing with China, in my humble opinion. The third misconception is that innovation is only possible in open societies, and maybe we will hear more on the topic of innovation from the representative of ABB, for instance. So China is basically proving all these misconceptions wrong. And the latest one, innovation, China is in a very unique position, as it has unique factors that facilitate innovation. So it, for instance, has many young consumers in a relatively densely populated place, the big cities mainly, many skilled workers. There is an abundance of venture capital. There is a relatively low protection and high willingness of consumers to adapt to new technologies. and in my view, rather quite smart, laissez-faire approach of the Chinese government, who gives a lot of freedom and room for trial and error, much more than in other economies. And that is quite remarkable, I think. A very good friend of mine who has been doing business with China for more than 30 years, he said that, well, this is due to the fact that China has made rather negative experience with the planned economy and so that explains the government's defensive reflex to the economic innovations and that it's no longer forceful. And of course, that does not mean that every Chinese is an innovator, as is the case in many so-called innovative economies. Now, maybe what facilitates, in my view, development in everywhere in the world are political stability, solid first-class infrastructure, ideally, and a good level of education. So and China clearly is providing all of that and does, I think, an excellent job on that. On political stability, something that is of tremendous importance to the government for very understandable reasons, and they are able to provide a manageable level of certainty for investors. I think that's the underlying, that's the main goal of that. And maintaining peace and order, of course. On infrastructure, I mean, everybody who has been living in China or visited China, I guess, was impressed with the quality of infrastructure they were able to put up in such a short period of time. It's simply mind-boggling, and it today has probably, or certainly, one of the best infrastructures worldwide. And with the Belt and Road Initiative, China is now kind of exporting this expertise, this unique expertise it possesses in the field of infrastructure. However, from a European point of view, the Belt and Road Initiative is, generally speaking, viewed rather critically. Especially, there was a lot of negative PR, anti-Chinese PR in Europe when China bought ports in Greece and Italy and in other parts of the world. Whereas the Chinese perspective, of course, is a very different one. It's a rather giving thing that they're doing that is of mutual benefit and something very positive. I guess the truth lies somewhere in between. What is obvious, I think, is that China clearly is pursuing, Henry, you mentioned the US, that is kind of created a world order that is serving themselves in the first place. I fully agree. China is also pursuing a China first strategy ever since, and I mean no malice when I say that. It's fully understandable. Maybe even more countries should pursue such an approach. I don't know. We can maybe discuss that, and maybe some of you disagree or agree. Maybe briefly, there are also chances involved for Swiss companies. I see that mainly in the field of infrastructure suppliers, financial service providers, banks and reinsurance companies, for instance, and maybe very select companies in the machinery industry. So overall, I think it all boils down to, I mean, China continues to be a contradiction and presenting us with challenges and opportunities alike, and it's all about finding a smart approach and finding a way of balancing these two. Switzerland, I believe, does that very smartly, successfully, and mutually beneficial. And maybe that could also be a way forward for, I don't know, for other countries. I think Switzerland handles China quite intelligently. We're one of the few countries worldwide that has a free trade agreement with China, for instance. So that's a milestone in the history of our foreign relations. I think we will hear more from a second panelist on the free trade agreement. Yeah, maybe to close off, the Belt and Road Initiative is, in my view, a tool to expand China's reach. Of course, it is. Its economical power. It is expanding its influence, its reach. But it's only one tool. There are other tools that are being used. One, for instance, is the Soft Power Initiative that was launched back in, I think it was 2012, when then President Hu Jintao, when he publicly said that China was battered by Western culture and he would like to change that. So that's when he launched, his administration launched this global soft power initiative. So which is basically aiming at creating trust and understanding, a different understanding for China. We also, so one offspring of that, for instance, are the Confucius Institutes that are mushrooming across the world, also in Switzerland. I think we have 3 now, and a lot more. Something I was personally affected, and something that is not very much known, I believe, is that China is also undertaking a global media offensive, as in they are on a huge shopping spree, purchasing various media, can be websites, magazines, newspapers, TV stations, radio stations, and so forth. And they do this seemingly randomly and globally. Now, I know that firsthand because one of the companies I was managing in China, a medium-sized media company producing business intelligence, we were sold to a Chinese investor who, in a rather shady deal and very intransparent, many months later on, we found out that it's actually he's not a private investor. He is representing the government, and he gets generously funded by the central government with the only purpose of purchasing media titles globally. So that, of course, raises a question: why would China do that? What are their intentions? And I'm not in a position to give an answer. I have to quote one of my Chinese friends who said, well, if they need it, they have it. But yeah, that is also something that is maybe not so well known in the West. Very briefly, and then I would like to pass the microphone on. I do recall a rather absurd situation, in my personal opinion. I think it was it 3 years ago when Xi Jinping, here in Davos, when he presented himself in his speech as kind of a proponent of global free trade and open economies and more or less frictionless trade, whereas at the same time Donald Trump was pictured as a protectionist, anti-free trade. And I am struggling to understand that because when we do a simple comparison of just a few tariffs, import duties, the reality is a completely different one. Just to give you one example, not too many figures, but if you want to import cars into China, the tariffs were 25%. They have now been reduced, I think, to 15%. So it's a rather protective, a well-protected market. When you want to import cars into Europe, there is a 10% duty that applies, and now coming to the US, 2.5%. So, and that's just one product category, but you can go through literally almost everything, from steel to rubber to chemical commodities, whatever it may be. The mechanism is exactly the same. So in reality, I think America always was, and will be open for business, where China is still pursuing a very selective approach. It is allowing, it is opening up gradually, slowly, very selectively, very smartly from their point of view. China first, again, I understand it, but I think it's important to maybe not mix things up. Maybe we can talk later about, if this is of general interest, about some military geopolitical aspects, but for now, I think I would...
Thank you, Fabian. Interesting notes, interesting also to see and to point out that speech of Xi Jinping here in Davos, because at the time he was really protected like that. He was the new world order, the new free world order, and Donald Trump, of course, does everything to prove that he's changing the other way. But you start not from a 0-0 level. You know, one country starts from a different level than the other. But it is part of what I consider the shifts that are taking place. And it is part of a controversy that will probably shape our future. Now, without further ado and without taking the thunder from Joanne, I want to pass the word to you, Joanne.
Because there's a screen, if you don't mind, I will stand here and do a presentation about the fashion business. And also, more importantly, is the sustainability work we have done in fashion. Okay, so very quickly, fashion runs business global-wide for a couple of brands like Lanvin, Waffle, St. John Knits in the States, Caruso in Italy, and also Tom Tailor in Germany. So from myself, actually, I start my career from KPMG as an accountant in Big Four, and also then took over as a CFO of a couple of corporations. So I'm not from fashion industry, but I was very shocked by my personal discovery about this sustainability of this industry. First of all, fashion industry is a big market. We have a 2.5 trillion, business in fashion, and a year there's 150 billion garments made. Can you imagine that? So it's almost like everybody has 20 new per person, like new garments. However, 30% of these garments or the dresses are not used. So we buy it at a discount, for example, we put it into the wardrobe and we even didn't find a chance to wear it. And there's a couple of data I can show you. In order to make a t-shirt made by cotton, it costs 700 gallons of water. Means a man, if he drinks 8 cups of water every day, it can provide him like a 3.5 years water supply in order to make a cotton-made t-shirt. And the more serious problem is the synthetic problem, because polyester, for example, it takes 200 years for polyester really can be landfills and disposable. And currently about 20% to 35% of the micro plastic pollutions into the ocean is from fashion business. So it was really shocked when I really read this data. So customers are now really starting to care, because if I talk to you that 30% of the dresses you bought you haven't used, but even one shirt take 3.5 years water supply for a mature, adult man, it's really scary. So there's more and more concerns about the environment. For example, a study by a UK university said that about if you buy something, about 9% of the customer now put environment impact as a point. this has increased to 18% if it's for the young generation aged 18 to 20 to 24. But this percentage is even higher for vegans. It's rated like a 13.5%. So overall speaking, people are more and more concerned about environment. Look at Davos this year. When we drove from the downtown to here, it's really, I mean, the snow here is under my expectation. But if you look at Shanghai in China, the winter is so warm. I mean, the heavy jacket we don't need it anymore for this winter. So the global temperature is a problem. However, when during the customer purchase, if environment is a concern point, it's usually more higher impact on the food or healthcare consumption rather than fashion. Because as a lady or man, if you go to like a retail store, usually you won't say, I buy this because it's environmental, beneficial, right? Usually, I mean, for our industry, still a lot of work to do. There's more and more actions taken even by the brands. For example, more luxury brands now stop to using fur. So you heard a lot of news, a lot of people owes to that no fur. And especially for the luxury brands, usually if there's a no consumption for the inventories, luxury brands will destroy those merchandise. They want to sell at discount, but now more and more brands say, no, we won't destroy it, because once you destroy it, create more pollutions. And the third one is, more designer brands also cater into that sustainability, like Stella McCartney, which is, she is very famous in the industry, say we should do more to protect our earth and our environment. So now it's in a new decade. Everybody is talking about sustainability. So there's one event, big topic is who made me. So in the past, in your dresses, people don't know the details of the dresses. For example, who made me? Is it in Bangladesh or in Pakistan, or is it in Europe, France, Italian? And then, blockchain technology really drive the changes of people can trace all these fashion pieces, knows whether all the supply chains are managed in a good shape. There's a lot of argument about sustainability and also the really whether the economics for the brands, how they can make money, because every companies in the past they try to minimize the cost in every step of the manufacture. If we want to switch to a sustainability way, usually it is really costly. Okay, so like the traditional way to do this. And the painful point for fashion is that in some seriously polluted industry, it's more concentrated in certain area. But fashion is everywhere, every country. Made in Italy, made in France, made in China, made in Pakistan. So fashion is very fragmented. And also when brands want to really protect the environment, however, most of the brands, they don't control the supply chains. So brands and the supply chains are in two ends. So that's why we need to more push for, first of all, governmental support to really support the manufacturers, look at how to improve the plant. There's a lot of movements now on this side. For example, Levi's. Levi's already, work together, global finance corporations to really invest into technologies just to improve the percentage of the insolution during the whole manufacturing process, or the technology of like leak protection to save quite a lot of energies, which also is much greener than before. Or H&M, they launched an event event about help support and manufacturing to produce by solar or wind energies. Okay, here is the famous people and all the group wearing fashion pack. A lot of brands already signed on that organization to say we need to really protect our earth. Okay, and then more and more certificate was granted for those products, like a waffle. It has 2 from cradle to cradle, like green golden certificates, which means that including biology and also technology. So either the bodies made by waffle, you can, after you use that, you can send back the stores. They can be disposed and put into soil, become some like a nutrition feed the plant, or they can be like reused into another yarn and then produce another type of a new bodies. So all this means that we want the brand want to really enter into a territory that what they produce, the well-used material, 100% disposable and very green. So this is a introduction about the fashion actions on anti-pollution.
My name is Andreas Röhrig and I'm responsible for product development and innovation at Wolford. My passion is the product and sustainability. Our journey started in 2013. We decided to improve our sustainability in the company. Cradle to cradle is a very holistic approach. In our case, it works that we get the product back from our end consumer, that we give it to our partner. He has a biodegradation facility and they produce biogas, and we are buying this gas and running our production facility with that. The fishnet product is made out of econyl yarn. The econyl yarn is a very special yarn which is made out of fishnet. So you can say we are producing net tight produced out of fishnet. We want to be 50% circular economy by 2025.
Okay, so 2020 is really about our action time, especially for the fashion. And also we will try our best to do that. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. I did not know that I'm drinking bottles of water when I'm wearing my t-shirts. But I will keep that in my mind in the future. A lot of food for thought. Now let me go to Igor.
Yes, thank you.
Our gentleman from ABB. He might have a different approach, but Igor, the stage is yours.
Yes, thank you. I think it will be quite difficult to speak after such a fascinating speech about fashion. I'm representing an industrial company, and probably it's a little bit boring to talk about all sustainable goals which we have in the company. Just a few words about ABB. ABB is a company of about 150,000 people with representation in more than 100 countries, and mostly we are working in electricity world and industrial automation. If you open your small electrical sheet in your apartment, you probably can see some contactors named ABB. That is small device which is most closed for consumers, if you like. But mostly ABB is dedicated to power grids and industrial, big industrial projects. Regarding sustainability and globalization, I will probably speak about Caspian region. I'm personally involved, and which topic we're trying to cover here in this pavilion. ABB, very well presented in Caspian region. We have offices in Georgia, Azerbaijan, Russia, and Kazakhstan. If you look at superpowers, which we are talking about today, all superpowers also presented in the Caspian region. First of all, it's coming from China. Second, it's Russian influence. And third is US. And depending on countries, we have certain presence of each this country, not only in political life, but in economy as well. For instance, Georgia is quite dominated by US products. Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Russian presence is visible. Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, I see more presence of Chinese. For sure, Chinese influence in this region is very high. And what is happening today, that during the international projects, countries even inventing certain tools how to protect themselves in big international tenders. For instance, they implement a rule that local production should have a certain preferences. For instance, 10% or 15% additional discount should be granted for local produce goods. That happens, for instance, in Uzbekistan. And of course, probably that creates unfair competition, but by this tool, country trying to defend themselves. Regarding sustainability goals, ABB today is mostly focusing on three goals. First of all, it's very important for us, it's health and safety, because our workers are always involved, and we're trying to achieve zero fatality. And actually, last year, 2019, we achieved this goal. We didn't have any fatality worldwide. I'm speaking not only ABB itself, but also about ABB partners who are working for ABB during projects. Second, that's very important for us, it's quality. Quality, because despite all efforts which we're doing for the last decades, quality should be anyway increased. And quality in production, quality in goods delivery, design, installations, commissioning, that is in a focus of the company management. And third, probably in Davos, a lot of companies will talk about, but nevertheless, digitalization is also important to have sustainability today. Because with digitalization, we anyway increase level of control in industrial side, in power grids, in apartments, and so on. And that helps us to achieve certain goals. Then we decrease certain cost, because cost today is a driver in many projects and in many companies. And third, of course, we decrease also human involvements. It's also decrease some mistakes. And as last comment, I would like to say that the world is really reshaping now, and the global companies are reshaping as well. And we have some tendencies to join to other companies. For instance, it's well known already that Power Grids business unit of ABB will join to Hitachi. And by this, we also trying to build a sustainability, because we think that by this business model, we achieve more than we had before. Thank you.
Thank you, Igor. So you are saying that ABB is undergoing the same shifts and changes like the global powers are. And with the new, I think with the new CEO coming in, the announcement of changes seem to be immense. But good luck anyway. Good luck for the world, and good luck for the ABBians. Yeah, it's the job. Thank you. With this, I would like to give the word over to Professor Lin Boqiang, Dean of the China Institute for Energy and Policy Studies. He has a lot to say, but he cannot say everything. Otherwise, he will talk for the rest of the week. So we will have to try to contain him, but he will have a lot to say. Professor?
No, that's not really true. In fact, I don't have much to say after the excellent panelists or discuss all angles. But I do want to have comment on two of the panelists' discussions. The first one is about the Belt and Road Initiative, by building infrastructure around the Belt and Road. That's what China really wants. And China wants to have a win-win situation. And of course, there's debates about the Belt and Road activities there. One of the major debates is building power plants, coal-fired power plants in for example, Pakistan. Just finished one recently, and people began to question that, under you want to deal with climate change, whether to build a coal-fired power plant at this moment is sensible or not. From my perspective, I think that if there's a demand, there will be a supply. And that's one. Second is that if we can build wind and solar, nuclear or hydro in Pakistan to meet the current power shortage, that will be the best. But the fact is that those are hydro unique potentials. Nuclear, I think most people don't like it. Wind and solar is more expensive and also too slow to build a scale which can meet the power shortage at this moment. So to build a power plant, coal-fired power plant, an effective one, efficient one, I think China can build most efficient power plant in the world, or in the world at this moment. After many years in the coal-fired power plant business. And let me look at it this way. If the coal-fired power plant somehow can change the consumers' behavior, like cutting trees, like distributed coal-fired burning, coal burning, that might be a good idea. It might be more effective by a huge power plant comparing to individual burning of coal. In fact, that's what China tried to deal with at this moment. So that's one. It might not be such a bad idea. Second is that we have to realize that we in developed countries, particularly, have to understand what are the needs of the poor country. The environment is not everything. For example, let me use China's experience as example. China, over the last 40 years, produced, many people argue, 100 times. Maybe that's true. Water, air, everything. But China's life expectancy increased almost 20 years over the last 40 years. That's first number. Second number is that Beijing and Shanghai are two of the most polluted cities in China. But the life expectancy in Beijing and Shanghai are highest among all Chinese cities. Now that I'm not arguing that the pollution is good. That's not my intention. My intention is that improve the life expectancy. Just look at this angle. You need something possibly more than the air, dealing with air pollution, like the income, like medical facilities. So if we really understand the poor countries' needs, we might look in the issues differently. So that's one comment on the infrastructure development in China. But China just not build coal-fired power plant along the Belt and Road. They build other infrastructures. That's one. The second one comment, I will comment on the sustainability. The Fosun girl just mentioned that we produce 20 new each year. 30% never be well. That's sustainability issue. In my view, that we are having a system we believe is best for us, which we call market economy. What is essential in market economy? It's to sell. Everybody try to sell everything to you, even though that. So that's why I do not trust big major corporations, not ABB. There's one time that a couple months ago, I asked my students, say, what? I use Apple 6, okay? I bought it about 3 years ago. And it becomes so slow, that's incredible. I said, get me an Apple 7. No, my students said, no, you cannot buy it. I said, why? No, it's 11 now. I'm pretty sure that Apple presents a very clear social responsibility, and together with the ABB, that they want to have sustainable clean development. So let's say that you build one union, your energy intensity decline, but you buy 2, then you come all the way back. So our situation is really fundamental about sustainability. We have a system that everybody tries to save everything. On the demand side, human desire is unlimited. If they have income, they will definitely buy it. If you want to buy something, somebody will produce for you, no question about it. If you want to buy something cheaper, they will produce something cheap for you. Even though on the other hand, they say they want to produce something that's sustainable, everything. So, if you look at last decades, almost a decade, the income increase and the energy increase still go hand in hand. Not much deviation. There's some improvements, but improvement very slowly. Then you might ask the question, what are the effect of the technology advance both in the demand and supply side? Well, technology advances seem up to this point to not solve the problem of increased income together with increased energy consumption. Look at the United States. Even though the United States consumes so much low-end, high-energy intensive product from developing countries, its energy demand still increasing, not decreasing. And that comes to my earlier point. You buy one, even though that energy intensive of that one decline. You buy 2, it go back, and possibly even more. So that's our fundamental problem, okay? Technology advance will not solve the problem. And what we need to do, I think in my view that we need to change consumer behavior fundamentally. That us force the corporation to produce something that's not only cheaper, also sustainable. That's one. Second, if somehow we fail to do that, we cannot contain the energy demand. We do need to change the energy structure. We don't have another choice. Let it go. But let's bring the renewables in a larger scale into the energy system such that we can somehow that reduce the emission and also environment to a certain extent. Now, how to do that? One, of course, is that the government need to determine to do that. Need to determine to do that. Need to do not be affected by the short-term fluctuations. Like when economy is good, then you talk more about the environment. When economy is not too good, then you come back and say, okay, let's cut back a bit. So the government need to be determined, need to willing to support the renewables. That's from domestic perspective. From international perspective, trade barriers, particularly on the renewables, need to be brought down. Because if some country, like China, can produce something really cheaper, why not use it? Yes, we do have protections, no question about it. But I think that we should give the renewables a second thought. That's something that's good for all of us, and it's going to deal with the common issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Now, this is the moment where I, of course, have to check my watch, and time is almost over. But even though time is almost over, a panel discussion is not a panel discussion if the floor cannot participate. So please raise your hands and show your hands so that we can see what's going on. Yes, the gentleman from Pakistan.
Thank you very much. A very interesting session, I must say. I represent the logistics industry. FIATA is the organization, and I happen to be from Pakistan, of course. We have heard some discussion in this panel regarding the political connotations of the whole project of the BRI. But there is also a very large commercial side to it, especially as far as the logistics industry is concerned. You know, this project connects the world in a very different way. It connects the world as we've never seen it before. It gives a very huge reach, and it creates a huge opportunities for the logistics industry. And many people, at least in this industry, look at that in a different way. So political issues aside, I think there is a very large dynamics of how the economies of the region or economies of those countries where this thing actually touches, how they will shape up. So this is something food for thought and something that we need to be aware of. The BRI moves into Southeast Asia. There's a vertical connect there. You go further, there's rail connections to Europe. There is through the Caucasus. Then you've got the CPAC project in Pakistan, which is huge, $62 billion. And it only creates an enabling environment. Primarily, it is power plants and road structure. So we're talking about another $150 billion of investment coming into industry. So the dynamics are so large for some economies, it's something to be recognized in that aspect, I say. Thank you.
Thank you. I take it that was not really a question, or does anybody of the panel want to reply? Maybe Igor?
Yeah, thank you. I fully agree with you that economical topics is very important for BRI initiatives. And regarding logistics, Caspian region also participates in construction of new ports. Probably, you know, Turkmenistan, Turkmenbashi, yeah, Azerbaijan trying to do the same, and Georgia, Anaklia port. Yeah, that's everything is connected. It's only a question from where they taking those resources to construct ports. Sometimes it's directly from BRI, or sometimes it's completely independent from this initiative. But they go by this way. And of course, corporations, for instance, like ABB, also follows this And we, for instance, participated in Turkmenbashi port construction. We did a big power station, 220 kV. It's some kind of our impact in BRI, if you like. Thank you.
Thank you. Now the lady in the back, please introduce yourself as you take the mic.
Thank you very much to the organizers for organizing this very interesting and important panel. And thank you to give us the opportunity to dialogue. I very much share this need to dialogue. I'm a Margaretha Kinner-Nellen. I was a 16-year-long member of parliament of the Swiss parliament. And in that capacity, I hosted in Switzerland, Andermatt, in September, a parliamentary conference on Silk Road Support Group under the title The BRI as a Driver for Sustainable Development Goals. Personally, as a Swiss citizen who had the opportunity to visit People's Republic of China in 1974 for the first time, and who has since lived and traveled in Asia and throughout OSCE, based in Bern with law practice as an expert on international law. I believe that Eurasia has a big chance and challenge to really bring about a peaceful, huge continent. And when I say peaceful, I mean not only absence of all wars, I mean also, as a woman and a lawyer, absence of all violence in the societies. We have such rich cultures and history to share. We can learn from each other. Thank you for mentioning quality. Quality can be adverse to quantity and to profit. So I do not really have a question other than I would like to point out that in this Andermatt conference, hosted by the Swiss delegation of the parliament to OSCE, which I chaired until December, last December, we issued on September 7 an Andermatt declaration. It's on the net, you can find it. And members of parliament of about 27 member states of OSCE, we declared, I will only read the first paragraph, the following in regards to the BRI. And maybe some of you panelists would like to react to what we stated as number one paragraph. We declared, also in regards to the BRI, we endeavor to promote justice, the rule of law, good governance, human rights, gender equality and women empowerment, peace, high social and labor standards, and people's participation also in regards to the BRI. And I share what my colleague, lawyer colleague, and moderator, Mr. Lustenberger said at the beginning. In Switzerland, we are very interested in the BRI. We are very constructive, I think, but we like to dialogue about it, as we like you to dialogue about Switzerland and our evolution. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Everyone interested in the Andermatt Declaration, please look it up. Now, there's a gentleman up here, and I think that's the last question that we, and I emphasize question, that we can take.
Okay, my name is Ray Leonard. I'd like to respond to Dr. Lin very respectfully, the question of coal-fired power plants. And I'd like to start with just mentioning two very hard truths. One is that if you talk to climate scientists and not politicians, the chance to limit the temperature rise to 2 degrees centigrade is basically gone. We've lost that opportunity. The real chance is to limit it to below 3 degrees. The second hard truth is that the Western nations, the United States and the European Union, contribute only about 20% of greenhouse gas emissions now, and that percentage is dropping every year. By 2025, it'll be 20%. By 2030, it'll be just 15%. So the real battle with greenhouse gas emissions is coming from the rest of the world. Now, the Belt and Road Initiative is a tremendous initiative to rise, to help the living standards of many nations around the world. But one controversial aspect is the building of coal-fired power plants, because coal is the worst of the greenhouse fossil fuel emissions. There is an alternative, and that alternative is natural gas. Now, until recently, natural gas was much more expensive than coal, perhaps 2 to 3 times as much. But because of the surge in exports, the price of natural gas has been cut in half, liquefied natural gas, in just the last 2 or 3 years. So a policy that may have made sense 5 years ago perhaps does not make sense now. And China, in its Belt and Road Initiative, now supports about 70% of all new coal-fired power stations in the Eastern Hemisphere, including places like Pakistan and Bangladesh, where climate change is perhaps the biggest threat to the viability of the nations in the future. So my question is, would China reconsider its policy of coal-fired power plants now, something that may have made sense 5 years ago, but may not make sense now?
Oh, that's certainly true. China themselves do not build new coal-fired power plant now. There's still new coal-fired power plant coming online every year, but those was built, decision was made long time ago. So the Pakistan one decision was also made about 6, 7 years ago. Yes, situation has been changed. And China definitely respond to that, not only road, Belt and Road, also domestically. If natural gas is affordable, they definitely go for natural gas, and there's no question about it. But you look at the China energy mix, natural gas increase in the last couple of years is the most. Comparing to all others, you hear the large incremental of the wind and solar. In fact, that's not true. The large incremental is natural gas. And that's something we also worried about, because we are looking at natural gas also has CO2 emissions. The last few years, China's coal share in energy mix has been reduced every year by more than 1%. And that's very good. But look at the numbers, most of the substitution are coming from oil and gas, not much from renewables. But yet China is the largest renewables incremental in the world. What's going on? It's because renewables are so small, even with the rapid increase, it's still not sufficient to meet the demand at the same time to substitute the coal. And that's the dilemma everybody facing. If you look at world today, yeah, renewable increase very fast, but the large incremental still coming from oil and gas and coal. Southeast Asia, with a good economy, the last 10 years, coal almost doubled compared to all others. So it's quite difficult, actually, that making choice between economy as well as what is available. So in my view, the most easier way to substitute the coal is a very slow energy demand for China and for everywhere. But problem is, would that be possible? Thank you.
Thank you very much. With this, I would like to ask the audience to give my panel a great hand of applause. Thank you to all of them. One last sentence to give you a little bit of food for thought as you leave, and maybe recontinue, because there will be a second nice panel just following this one. I want to give you a thesis on your way out. What if the current short-termism of democratic elected countries necessarily leads to nationalism and necessarily leads to exploitation? Possibly you need long-termism and you need other mechanisms to put very, very important policies into place. Policies that last longer than your next election period. That's the thesis that I want you to leave this session with. I'm not saying democracies are bad. I live in a very, very respected democracy, but we have to think about this. Thank you very much.